We're live, Councillor Ball. Over to you.
Thank you. Well, welcome to today's meeting of the CFA Corporate Governance Committee. And I think, as we all know, due to the current situation, all members of the Corporate Governance Committee are joining us online, and hopefully we'll have 2 other members joining us as we progress. And I think Anna has covered this, but just for good measure, I will just make sure that we do remain on mute until we need to actually speak within the meeting, and I think that's all understood. If members or officers wish to speak, please ensure that you use the raise hand function. This helps Anna, and not the chat facility. If at any point, and touch wood, so far it hasn't. If at any point the webcast fails, we will have a short adjournment, but please stay online while the problem is resolved. And then, of course, at that point we'll need to go back and make sure that our mobile phones are switched to silent as well. Well, no, that's just a normal thing we need to do. So perhaps just to check the systems that we are all hearing and seeing, I'll just go through members and ask you to switch your microphone on and just speak, and this will help Anna. So I think Councillor Barton was still waiting for Anna, and I think also Councillor Bentley. So that takes me to Mr. Cox.
Yes, we are.
Yes, I'm here, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Yes, I'm here, Chairman. Thank you.
Perfect, Mr. Harrison. Thank you. Mr. Kaufman.
Yes, I'm here, Chairman, and can hear and see you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mrs. Newton, my Deputy Chairman.
Present.
Brilliant, thank you. And Councillor Thukadar.
Yes, Chair, I'm here. I can hear you.
Perfect.
See you.
And of course, for myself, Kenneth Ball, I'm the Rutland representative on the combined authority. So just again, if we just make sure that everyone is on mute. Thank you. Starting just before I go to the agenda proper, can I just issue a special welcome to Mick Grucock and Paul Weston, who are joining us today, and also Amy Oliver, who a little bit later will be taking the difficult questions when Alison has to go off to another meeting. And I don't mean that, Amy, there won't be any difficult questions, I'm sure. So turning to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence, Anna.
We haven't had any.
No, it's just that we're noting for the moment.
Yes, probably Mr. Bentley and Councillor Barton.
Okay.
If we can't get them to join.
Hopefully that will resolve itself.
Yes. Councillor Barton, I'm here. Sorry, I'm Councillor Barton and I'm here.
Brilliant.
Oh, you did join. Right, lovely.
It took a while to log on. I had joined and then it seemed to log me out again and then I had to come back.
Okay, well, welcome. Very pleased to see you. So we're just really waiting for Mr. Bentley. So agenda item 2 then is to receive declarations by members of interest in respect of today's agenda. Are there any members, please? No? Okay. Really, as I thought, it's a fairly standard agenda, so we should be quite happy there. Agenda item 3 is to advise of any items which the chair has decided to take as urgent. I have not been notified of any urgent items. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the chair's announcements, and as there are only 2 short ones, rather than issue in advance, I'll just make this following sort of statement, and this is really on a COVID update. The service continues to respond well to the ongoing pandemic, both in terms of the fire and rescue service, but also in supporting the local resilience forum to support the community. This remains a very challenging period, but one that the service is standing up to extremely and very well. Now, I have in my pre-meeting with the chief, we will hear a little bit more about this when we get to agenda item 12. And the second words I would just like to issue is that members will have seen the briefing note emailed to you regarding a successful prosecution against a previous member of the service and a landlord. This is the culmination of a lot of hard work over months and years from the fire protection team, supported very well by the collaboration arrangements in place with our county's legal team, our county council's legal team. And I think perhaps, Callum, it might be appropriate just for you to add a few extra words to that at this particular stage.
Yeah, of course, Chairman, thank you. Good afternoon, members. I think the successful prosecution's a real feather in our cap. The fire protection team work exceptionally hard, and this has been over a number of years rather than months to get to this final point of sentencing. The judge did award a significant sum of money. It was just in excess of £60,000 back to the fire authority for the costs that we'd incurred. A significant portion of that will be for the legal costs and the barristers that were employed through the excellent collaboration that we've got with the county council and the legal support with that. And the other remaining £20,000 that's coming back to us will offset some, but not all, of the officer time that was invested into the prosecution. It's also worth noting to members that one of the prosecutions was against a former staff member of Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service. This person had served with us in excess of 25 years, I believe, and moved into fire protection on his retirement. It's worth noting they never served a day in the protection team whilst they were in our employment, and then moved on to the public arena of fire protection inspections and supporting the businesses at that point. So it's a real testament to our fire protection team. We remain one of the few fire and rescue services that successfully prosecute on a regular basis, but obviously it takes a lot of time and effort. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions, members, or are we content at this stage? Perhaps if you have a question, we can always take it later. It is a very important area, and of course the onus is very much on the authority to protect the public at large, and that's what we continue to do very successfully. Agenda item 5 then is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September 2020. On your pack, the pages 5 to 14, and I think it's fairly clear. So from the chair, I would like to move that we accept the minutes of the 16th of September. I'm looking for a seconder.
I'll second the minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mrs. Newton. Seconded. And we take that as tacit approval, fairly straightforward. So we move on to...
Councillor Ball, can I just interject? Yes. It's Anna. Yes, Mr. Bentley has now joined the meeting, so I don't know whether you want to just confirm that you can hear him and he says that he's here, like you did the roll call.
Indeed, indeed. Well, welcome, Mr. Bentley, and can we just hear from you to make sure that everything is loud and clear, as it were?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear you well.
Good. Very pleased to see that you've been able to join us. Thank you very much. So we have, yes, we proposed and seconded the minutes. So we move on then to agenda item 6. And this is our first report on the financial monitoring to the end of September 2020. Pages within your pack of pages 15 to 20. And I think, Alison, you're going to take us through this one and present this paper.
I am. Thank you, Chair. At the last Corporate Governance Committee meeting, members had the first report on budget monitoring in the year. This is the second. It is incredibly short for the simple reason that there is nothing of any significance that has changed since the last report. And really what we're showing you is a forecast underspend for the year in the areas that we have talked through, in fact, for not just the last report, but for a number of reports, and which you'll recall that the Chief outlined our proposals to work through these issues and resolve them once and for all. So we are underspending on the support staff pay budget. We do have some agency and temporary staff in. Obviously, what the Chief will want to do is look at his support staff, particularly in the light of the inspection report, because we all know that we need support staff to support our frontline staff, HR, finance, procurement, legal, all the things that we've talked about. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, well, we clearly don't need them. So we are working through what that establishment looks like. And of course, the retained staff issue that we've talked at length about before, where we probably are never going to be, like no other service will be, at the level of retained staff that we would like, because times have changed. So it is good news for you that we are managing and delivering whilst underspending in the staffing area. The one-off underspend will help boost our resources when we're going into what will be a challenging budget environment. And I don't mean just for next year, I mean going forward, given the economic position that the government is in. So that's really the headline, is that we continue to forecast an underspend. We know why it is. We know what we've got to do to address the issues within that. But an underspend, nevertheless, is welcome to bolster our reserves. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Alison. Well, as you say, I think it's a sound and a good news report in view of the situation that we find ourselves in. So members, from your reading and deliberations, do you have any questions? Yes, Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a brief report. It's very succinct, and we don't need to really have reams. It's all there in front of us. I'd like to thank Alison for a report and to move the report, Mr. Chairman.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Houston. Shall we just check if there are any other questions? I can't see, and you may need to help me, Anna, on this. I think we're clear on that, members.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we are being asked to really note the report. So Mr. Harrison is moving that the revenue budget and capital programme position as at the end of September is noted. Mr. Harrison is proposing. I'm very happy to second that from the chair, and I take it, members, we are all in favour of that.
Yes.
I'm getting the nods and the rest. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. So we move on then to agenda item 7, which is the performance monitoring April side of things to September 2020. It's pages 21 to 58 of your agenda packs. And I think we're going to the Chief to present and take us through this paper.
Thank you, Chairman. So overall, it's a very pleasing report to feed back to the Corporate Governance Committee, and I'm sure members would have read and seen the positive figures that are contained in the report. I think for clarity, I'll focus primarily on pages 25, 26 and 27 of the bundle, which is the overarching headline tables of the report. And I think it's only fair to say, whilst the report is incredibly encouraging with a reduction pretty much in everything across the board, I have to be honest with you and say this is significantly skewed by the impact of COVID across the LLR region. And whilst it does make very pleasant reading for us, I'm not going to be able to promise to you the sustainability of that as the country returns back to normal, hopefully in the coming months. Yes. I also want to clear up just something, as I'm conscious members would have received a number of notifications around fatalities over the preceding weeks and months. It actually relates to KCI 2.1 fire fatalities. The report is showing 2 fatalities, one in August and one in September. Unfortunately, we were notified on the 5th of November of a further fire fatality, but that incident actually occurred in very early October. So unfortunately, whilst the person was rescued from the fire and taken to hospital, they've succumbed to their injuries. So unfortunately, that fire fatality number will go up next month. and it may overlap slightly with the reporting just because of the delayed death. So just for clarity, as it stands right here, right now, we have had 3 fire fatalities in the reporting year, which the community safety team are working very hard across the county to focus our attention to minimise those. But it's only fair and right that I'm crystal clear with you, given the number of notifications and the slight delay in the reporting of that last fatality. Overall performance is generally quite good for the service, with sickness levels significantly down, appliance availability significantly up. Attendance times are broadly in and around the 10-minute target time from the IRMP for life-threatening incidents. And I think the areas that me and my team will be looking on over the coming months is to make sure that we maintain productivity as best as possible. So really look to increase the number of home fire safety checks completed, and really look to increase the number of fire protection inspections that we continue to deliver, but we'd like to see a higher number there. And I'd also like to stress these are the key reporting that we report on every quarter, and it doesn't reflect the additional work the service is undertaking to support the LRF in terms of COVID and a number of other work streams that have come online. So it would be remiss of me not to suggest that the organisation is working really, really hard, but it isn't necessarily reflected in our core reporting here, and we'll come to talk on that further down the agenda as we talk about the COVID inspection in the HMI. I don't propose to take the members through every individual page, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
No, I think that's absolutely fair, Chief. Members, do you have any?
Mr. Harrison's got his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Harrison, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Could I ask the Chief, the 10 minutes, does that start from the time the bell rings, or is it the time that the team's actually in the vehicle? Could I just have clarification, because it's one of these funny numbers. You know, I just don't know. I mean, originally I always thought it was the time they heard the bell, but the time they got in and did everything. But apparently that's probably not right. And I'd just like clarification, if you would. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Harrison. Actually, your confusion is shared by an awful lot of people across an awful lot of areas. When we went out to consult in the last IRMP, we actually wanted to clear some of that ambiguity up. So the 10 minutes actually now starts from the time you connect the call to fire control to the time we arrive. So it is a flat 10 minutes from the second that they make contact with us to the second that we arrive. To kind of remove all of that ambiguity, you're absolutely right. Historically, we used to report on from the second that the appliances were mobilised, but that doesn't include the call handling time. Now it's from the second that the member of the public contacts us to the second they arrive. That's the all-encompassing 10-minute time.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Chief, is there just a slight variation on that for the retained crews, where, first of all, of course, they have to be on the alert to be called in and then gather at the station, or?
So the performance standard is an average of 10 minutes, and that's across the entire county. So I think as the report will show you further down, some areas do receive a slightly delayed response, but on average the service will attend every life-threatening incident within 10 minutes. And I think it currently sits at 10 minutes and 6 seconds is our average attendance time for life-threatening incidents.
No, well, thank you for that. And again, of course, I think I would refer members to our previous meeting, and it does show the excellence of the service, where we did in fact have a fire at the Uppingham Community College, and the retained crew, you know, who had to be called out, were still the first to arrive on scene, followed, of course, by, I think, Oakham, and then across border from Corby. But again, I just think it underlines the excellence of our crews, and minutes, as we know, or seconds, literally save lives. So we should take that as a real strong element of success within our report. Did you have a supplementary, Mr. Harrison, to that, or are you content?
Content. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Callum.
Thank you. Members, are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so therefore
Chairman,
I think
I have my hand raised. I don't know
I beg your pardon.
Sorry, yes, you
Yes,
do. Yes.
yes, so indeed you have. Sorry, if you could take your hand down, Mr. Harrison, as well. That will help, Anna.
Right.
We're doing very well with the technical side, but Mr. Kaufman, the floor is yours.
Take mine down before I forget. It's to do with the on-call appliance availability, chart number 20. I noticed that Bilston and Uppingham are now over 80% non-availability, or 20% available.
Yes.
At what stage does the authority reconsider the point of stationing resources somewhere if 80% of the time they're not available? I mean, most of the retained ones, I'm not allowed to call them retained, on-call appliances.
On-call, yes.
You know, a lot higher than that. But
shall we ask the chief? But I think we've covered that one. You know, it is a fact over many years, but the chief will cover it. It's partly due, of course, to the if you like, the retains or on-call crews, because of their sort of very often, shall I say, a 9 to 5 job.
I realise that, but at what stage?
Yes, okay. I'll go straight. I'll go straight to the chief. But what I was going to say is that our rapid response vehicles, which we're bringing online, also help us on those particular figures. But Chief, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kaufman, for the question. Great minds obviously think alike. As when I was preparing and reading this paper, I asked exactly the same question around the availability of Bilston and Uppingham. So if I can refer you to chart 20, you'll note that there are actually 2 entries for Bilston and 2 entries for Uppingham. One of them represents their full-size fire appliance, the normal fire engine you'd expect, and the other is when they're unable to crew a full-size fire engine, we will move some of the tactical response vehicles in. Now that accounts for the lower figures. So when they're unable to crew the full-size appliance, we move a tactical response vehicle there and they crew that, but obviously that vehicle isn't there for all of the time. So that figure is a little bit deceiving around the availability, and it's certainly something I'll look to refine for our next corporate governance meeting, if that's okay with you, because I don't think it actually reflects the truth brilliantly, and you need the commentary to go alongside it. So I'll take that as an action, Chair, to refresh that data, but the availability is better than the 20% and 17% that chart would indicate.
So I think Mr. Kaufman, and thank you, Chief, I think Mr. Kaufman and members would welcome that. Do you have a supplementary to that, Mr. Kaufman?
No, Chair, thank you for the answer.
Right. I think the other thing which you could perhaps reiterate, Chief, when you come back, is I think the success of the rapid response vehicles, because very often when we have a fire, and I think we've covered this before, but when you have a pump out to a full fire, sometimes a full second unit is not required, and this is where the efficiency of the rapid response vehicle comes in, because sometimes you only need another 2 or 3 members to actually help in that particular situation. I think that's so, Chief.
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely right, Chairman. Commonly, it's not the number of fire engines you need, it's actually the firefighters on the ground to deploy it. So the tactical response vehicles are very good at supporting incidents. They're also very good for maintaining on-call availability when there are less than 4. And I can't emphasise this enough, it builds on the point you earlier said. Actually, if there are 3 firefighters available and an incident comes in, they are really keen to respond. They're giving up their time and sacrificing some of their family time and life to be available. They want to go to that incident. So it's also a really good tool for maintaining morale and availability, as well as supporting other incidents.
So, well, thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Kaufman, for that question, because I think it's helped to refresh our understanding of the demands in the service that we actually undertake. So,
Councillor Ball, Mr. Harrison has still got his hand up. I don't know whether he's got a supplementary or question, or whether
you have a supplementary, Mr. Harrison, please.
No, I do not. I'm afraid, Chairman, it's an old hand.
That's all right. No.
Thank you.
Absolutely fine then. Well, thank you. So therefore, members, if there are no further questions, I will move again from the chair that the performance of the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service for the period April to September 2020 be noted. And obviously, we're noting that we will have a further follow-up call report at our next meeting. I'm looking for a seconder.
I second it.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Newton. That's perfect. Okay, thank you. And I think members were all in favour. We can record our approval of that. So agenda item 8 is the progress against the Internal Audit Plan 2021. It's pages 59 to 78 on your agenda packs. And I particularly at this point welcome, obviously, Matt Davis, who, Alison, is Matt going to take the chair straight away, or do you want to add any words ahead of that?
No, for this item and the next item, Chair, I'm happy that Matt takes the lead.
Straight in with Neil. Okay. Well, Matt, as I say, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say I'm having a few connectivity issues, so if I end up having to switch my video off, apologies, but it might help with the bandwidth. I'll leave it for now and see how it goes.
As long as we can hear you, don't worry.
Okay. The report is obviously progress against the 2021 plan, and the committee is asked to note the progress. I will canter through this if that's okay, because a little bit like Alison, there's been very little change in it, as you would expect with a audit plan that's loaded to Q4. So we're just coming into the busy period. But in the executive summary, if we can draw your attention to paragraph 6, because that indicates whereabouts we are, that we've got audit completed to final and audit completed to draft, and we've got all but one of the remaining pieces of work in train, so work in progress. And the next page, paragraph 7, explains where we are on those, which is basically, if I was summing that up, we've got as far as we can at this time of year. Paragraph 8 then just reminds us that we do have 4 high importance recommendations still in this arena, which we'll go on to when we get to paragraph 13. But I think as important to this committee is the fact that there's no new high importance recommendations from our work to date. I wanted then just to move down to paragraph 11, because I think it's important to note we had a discussion at the last committee about COVID-19 and the effect basically predominantly on IT assurance, because there've been a lot of issues in the press about cybersecurity, etc., etc. So we said that we would complete a piece of work and bring it back to the March committee. I'm delighted to say that that piece of work has been done completely now, and it's just at draft report stage. On page 67 in the appendices, it actually says the areas we've looked at, but rather than members turning to that page, I'll just summarise it for you. So we looked at access management, we looked at remote access and security, we looked at the actual monitoring of network performance and capacity management during these times, access management, patching, collaboration tools, so that is your Microsoft Teams, your Zooms, etc. Asset management, obviously a lot of kit moving around when people weren't working at various stations or at headquarters, so the monitoring of that. Change control, expense management, and then probably the most important one in terms of reputational damage is the cybersecurity. And I'm pleased to say from our work today, the report hasn't been finalised yet, but I doubt, I can't see there being any changes to it, that there were no significant issues found. So just think we'll bring it to your attention properly when it's approved for the March committee. But I just wanted to give an early heads up on that is really good news. And to me, obviously, the committee said it was okay to carry out the work. The senior officers engaged very quickly, and then the officers on the ground, the practitioners, really worked hard with us, in times when they're under a considerable amount of stress. So I think that's a really good news story, to be honest, that I just wanted to bring to your attention. Moving on then into the actual main body of the report, just very briefly on the high importance recommendations. In paragraph 13, we said that we would conclude the work on contract procedure rules in March. So obviously we've not completed that piece of work yet. It was explained last meeting by the Assistant Chief Fire Officer that it was quite a lot of work that was actually going into that. So there is no point in looking at it until it's actually completed or at a stage where we can look at it. So that will be March. The change control high importance recommendation, just to say that when we did a walkthrough, when we looked at the COVID IT controls, we actually had a walkthrough of the new change control system, and we were encouraged by it. Obviously, what we couldn't do at the minute is actually test that for any changes going through the system because it was too early. So we've had a walkthrough of the service desk management tool, particularly with change control being the emphasis, and are happy with it. But obviously, we'll need to test that as part of the key ICT controls work in the final quarter. And then in paragraph 14, it just explains again those two other pieces of work that have got high importance recommendations in last year, key financials and payroll. We are just starting to do that work now in November onwards, right through to the end of the financial year. I'm hoping we can conclude those pieces early so that we can actually get to reporting in March. That's my aim, COVID permitting, obviously. So in conclusion, I'd just say we've completed the IT assurance work early, and we've completed everything we can do at this stage. We've got the rest is work in progress that you'd expect at this time of year. Importantly for the committee, there are no new high importance recommendations to bring to the committee, and we're addressing the other four. They're still in the domain of the committee, but you know when we're addressing those. So really a good news story as far as I'm concerned. I'm happy to take any questions.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Matt. And as you have said, there are some very good elements within that report, and some of the other issues are noted from previous meetings, and we understand the position going forward. So, members, do we have any questions to Matt Davis? No, I think you have a free run there. Well, that just goes to confirm the quality actually of the report and the fact that it really clearly explains exactly where we are. So then I will therefore move from the chair that we note that the progress made against the internal audit plan 2021 be noted. I'm looking for a seconder.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. That's good. I think Mr. Harrison beat you to it, Councillor Barton. But we'll record Mr. Harrison. Thank you. And I take it from the fact that there are no questions. Therefore, we are all very much in favour. So thank you for that. We will now move to agenda item 9, which is the update on developments on local external audit arrangements. It's pages 79 to 90 on your agenda packs. And as Alison has already stated, we will go, well, first of all, welcome Neil, and we will go straight to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm a little bit disappointed that Matthew didn't get any more questions, to be fair, because I was scrabbling around trying to find my notes, and it's caught me a little bit on the back foot. But we'll go with what we've got. So this, in effect, is a follow-up report to a report that I brought to Corporate Governance Committee, unbelievably, a year ago in November 2019. And that original report also contains some other developments in governance that were being consulted on at the time. But this report purely focuses on local, in brackets, external audit. It's always been called external audit, still referred to as external audit, but legally it's called local audit because it's part of the Local Accountability Act. And for the Combined Fire Authority is provided by Mazars. Unfortunately, Mazars aren't represented today because it may have been useful to obtain their views on the likely impacts of the changes that this report is presenting, because it is really going to affect the relationships between authorities and local/external auditors. So this report in short, concentrates on the outcomes of the Redmond review, which was reported on the 8th of September. It introduces the new code of audit practice, which will be applied by local auditors, i.e. Mazars, for 2021 audits and beyond. And then it just briefly refers to some other audit reviews that were run in tandem with Redmond, and which his review links back to. Before I go into the detail, I guess it's important to explain that ultimately I propose just to bring this paper to keep members informed of progress at this point, but then there needs to be a more defined plan amongst officers and members to evaluate certainly the localised recommendations of Redmond, and I'd expect colleagues from legal, finance and democratic support to lead on that. So into the report itself, and I've tried to provide a brief overview in paragraphs 3 onwards. And in terms of Redmond, if we start with Redmond, it was due to a large number of corporate governance failings that there were auditors were being criticised, and it prompted a number of reviews of audit and governance arrangements across all sectors. In the public sector, in June 2019, Sir Tony Redmond was asked by the Minister of Housing, Communities and Local Government to undertake an independent review of the effectiveness of the local audit arrangements and the transparency of local authority financial reporting. So the guiding principles behind Redmond and his review were accountability and transparency. It was a large-scale review with many responses from all interested parties, and the review report fell to 83 pages, and that was published in September. The report's broken down into, there's 19 recommendations that are applicable in effect to larger size local authorities such as the Combined Fire Authority, and it's broken down into 4 key component areas, and each of these have some impact with Corporate Governance Committee members, and in fact if any members are a member of an audit committee in their constituent authorities. So the report covers the direction and regulation and performance of local audit, the governance arrangements in place locally for responding to audit recommendations, and that's particularly resonant for the Corporate Governance Committee. Audit work on the financial resilience of local authorities. Again, that will be something that the Corporate Governance Committee would challenge in future. And then financial reporting in local government. So key findings, of which there were many, found that overall there was a lack of coherence in the local audit arrangements. There are 6 different entities that are involved in the audit cycle, and there isn't any one particular body that oversees all that, so you can see the hint for a recommendation there. The governance arrangements in relation to responding to audit recommendations particularly point towards audit committees or the Corporate Governance Committee, and whether they're equipped to provide effective challenge to either the auditors or the organisation's statutory officers. There was findings around the audit work on financial resilience of local authorities. This has always been a moot point in terms of chief financial officers, and whether the audit is actually, the local audit is actually geared towards reporting to members and the public the right things. So more emphasis on reporting the value for money and the financial sustainability of the authorities. And then there's also the financial reporting element of the findings, which raises questions and concerns around the format and the usefulness of local authority accounts, their complexity, and the fact that they're challenging for people to understand. So in conclusions, the summary, the review concluded that the current local audit arrangements fail to deliver in full the policy objectives underpinning the 2014 Act, and the overriding concern was a lack of coherence and public accountability. So quite a big message there that things needed to change in terms of moving forward in audit arrangements. A number of recommendations, and some of these are going to need some external regulation, some statutory regulation. So there'll be a new overseeing body an Office of Local Audit Regulation, and then various bodies' responsibilities will transfer to that. So that will be an oversight body. But then there are a number of localised recommendations. This is why I said earlier on at the start that it will take a lot of work in the background for officers and members to pick through these to see whether they are worthwhile and productive to the Combined Fire Authority. So there's localised recommendations around the role of the Audit Committee or Corporate Governance Committee. Don't want to dwell too much on all of the detail of the recommendations. Next stages are that Redmond has been providing a lot of information and backing up his review. It's gained a lot of support from a lot of institutions, including the audit firms themselves, who, and this is why I said it would be interesting to take Mazar's view, that they feel like they've been pulled in a number of ways for very low fees, and it's become, unsustainable in what they're doing. So it's an interesting take from the audit firms that they are supporting this wholeheartedly. As mentioned earlier, Redmond reckons that many of the recommendations localised and specifically around governance could be considered in the short term. So in paragraph 25, I've listed a few there. It relates to additional training for audit committee members. It relates to potentially the appointment of independent members to the committees and other roles of the audit committee. That's all I need to say on Redmond at the moment. I think just to conclude on that, as I keep on reiterating, I think there'll be a lot of work where officers and members will need to fully understand and debate all of the options relating to those recommendations, and we'll bring a further report to corporate governance in due course. The second part of the report is to do with the new Code of Audit Practice, and this convenient was ran in tandem almost with Redmond, but rather than being a request, this was a statutory requirement that every 5 years a Code of Audit Practice is reviewed. The Code of Audit Practice is what Mazars has to abide by in conducting its audit of the CFA's financial statements each year and giving opinions on its financial statements and the value for money opinion. So again, there's a lot of consultation on this, and a lot of change has occurred. It's ultimately the code has been retained as a single code, which means that it can be applied across local authorities, fire and rescue authorities, and health bodies. It also takes into a sort of principles-based approach rather than rules-based, which helps it ensure it doesn't become out of date. The biggest emphasis is really around on how auditors, local auditors, are going to obtain assurance on organisational efficiency. And among the biggest change really is on the providing additional narrative. So rather than the binary yes, you're efficient or not, there will be greater attention to some wording supporting those. So there'll be supporting statements on financial resilience, governance, and economic efficiency and effectiveness. The auditor guidance note that supports this area is a key area called AGN 03, and this is how the auditors determine whether an organisation has provided value for money, got good value for money arrangements, and that's the AGN 03, the guidance note, has received a lot of support and backing from audit firms in being helpful to them in being able to reach a more objective conclusion, a more understanding conclusion. It is actually important for audit committee members. I perhaps didn't bring this out too well in the report, but AGN 03, for the first time, as I found, makes two specific reference to audit committees. Firstly, in terms of having good governance arrangements, and the audit committee which should provide effective challenge, and that would be an evidence of good governance arrangements. Conversely, if an audit committee is deemed to be ineffective in terms of providing audit challenge or holding officers and members to account, then that could illustrate to the local auditor a weakness in the body's governance or governance arrangement. So that's an important new specific reference to audit committees in those guidance. Finally, on this report, it's just there were some other developments in the wider external audit field, and these were primarily related to audits of private sector companies, but there is some crossover. I don't want to dwell on them now. Suffice to say that Redmond has been looked at those other reviews, and where possible has built in the recommendations from those reviews and put them in tandem with his. So in conclusion, there's a lot of information and recommendations come out of these two pieces of work, or three pieces of work, and I think there will be a lot of work that's needed to understand the CFA's responses back to them. That's all I have to say. More than welcome to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. I think, as you said, the report is really there to inform us of progress. I think your written summaries are particularly helpful, and it's rather obvious that there's certainly more to come on the Redmond report, and also, of course, as is the further information on the Code of Audit Practice. But I think you've taken us up to date as far as you are able at this particular stage. So, members, do you have any questions for Mr. Jones, please? Yes, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I'd like to say is two things, really. Well, to thank you, Neil. That was first class. It is very technical. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not an accountant, but I do sit on governance elsewhere. My humbled opinion of this was that I felt that audit companies more or less control the market in a weird way. I just didn't feel it was, you know, as an audit committee, how we move forward at times, it didn't feel quite right, and how we were sort of steered around and moved into corrals in where we were. That was it. It's just my view, and who knows. I'd welcome any comments, Neil, if you can enlighten me more.
Rather than a comment from me, without throwing them into the lion's den, whether Amy or Alison wish to comment in terms of fee structures and how the arrangements work.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I had to put my hand up, actually, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, you've moved off my screen. You're back in now. Sorry.
Yeah,
right.
That's right, because Neil quite rightly is telling us what the sector is saying. Mr. Harrison, I absolutely agree with your observations, to be fair. Like most sectors about self-regulation, there are a number of issues with audit. So there's an increasing move to sort of one tier of audit. Now, of course, we are very different to Tesco's. So when Tesco's announce record losses or record profits, normally their trading environment hasn't changed. They've just revalued their assets. So if they value their assets up, they suddenly have record profits. If they value their assets down, they have record losses. The value of our assets, to be totally honest, does not hit your bottom line. So if Central Fire Station is worth 1 million or 10 million and then changes, it would not affect our budget discussions. So the public sector is very different, and there is some rub in the sector, if you like, where there is a move to try and more closely align private sector and public sector, which certainly we in the public sector don't agree with. So there's those sort of issues. You have, of course, with the abolition of the Audit Commission, the whole that I would say is who regulates auditors. So you've got the regulatory framework through the professional accounting route and accounting standards. But of course, the Audit Commission, particularly for the public sector, was the overseeing body, which is now not there. We do have PSAA, but they're a body that lets contracts. And as you know, we have very first-hand experience with our own previous auditors who we complained about. And the PSAA will say, we just let contracts. Our role is not to sort of audit the auditors. And then we have the National Audit Office, whose role is really to observe on the sort of practices of the public sector and not to guide the auditors. So there's all of those, and I'm not sure. The Redmond Review, I think, makes a lot of observations. I think Neil probably might just nod. Makes a lot of observations of all those issues I've covered. What the key thing will be is, what does that mean for us going forward? It does recognise that the audit market is fragile. It has had an awful lot of money squeezed out of it. What I would say on the other side is the obsession, because of, again, this alignment with public and private practice, the obsession on the valuation of our assets, which makes no difference to you as a decision maker. So almost, you know, an Amy who lives and breathes the audit would say the stuff that's really important to you as public sector and accountable decision makers is not necessarily the stuff that external auditors particularly see or are instructed to audit. So I think this report is really interesting in, here are all the sort of warts and all issues in the audit industry from their capacity, their ability, and if you like, what does it mean for you? The bit that's not in there, which obviously Neil can't write, is, so where is this going to go and what is it going to mean for us? And I think what we need to do probably, Neil, is start to, you know, this is really helpful in saying these are all the things, and then perhaps start to put our view to say, well, 25 of those things I think we ought to be parking because they're not relevant for you as decision makers. You know, that, as I say, the valuation of an asset is not particularly important to you. Whether a fire station is going to fall down or not is very important, but what its theoretical book exercise value is, it makes no decision to your council tax setting or your budget monitoring performance that you've looked at through the year, which is very different from someone like Tesco's, where their land values are very important to them. So yeah, that's where I am with it. There's a huge watch this space, because the lid's been taken off the tin and the worms are wriggling around, but what we do with them will be very interesting.
Well said,
certain way of describing it. Well done, I think, on that. Absolutely true. Anna, can you help me? My screen is moving around a little. I thought there was another councillor that wanted to ask a question.
Yes, Chair. It was me, Councillor Talukdar.
Okay, please come in.
My question is, thank you for the presentation, Neil. It's excellent. I just wanted to know, is there any resilience help from central government for the Leicestershire Rutland Fire Authority for the COVID-19? Because of course we need IT, PPE. So is there any funding came from central government? Thank you.
Yeah, that's one for me, isn't it, Neil?
Is
yes.
it one for Alison? Right.
We did have some central government funding. Of course, to fire authorities, it's relatively small.
Yeah.
Because obviously the lion's share of funding has gone to local authorities for, you know, the immediate response. I think, and this will be part of the budget discussions we have going forward, the small amount of money that we've set aside, because I think the big issue for the fire authority will be the catching up of all the things that we've not been able to do. Certainly a lot of the sort of fire prevention and protection, the proactive work that we want to do, is not appropriate to do. It wasn't certainly in the first lockdown. Still working through safe working practices, how you can go out and advise. And of course, our frontline staff were out certainly in the city, supporting the city on some of the regulatory inspections. So I think our COVID funding will be used for a slightly different reason, which will be, how do we catch up on the things that we haven't been able to do that we desperately do need to be able to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary on that, Councillor? No?
No.
You're happy? Okay. Did you want to say anything, Mrs. Newton, or were you?
No, I'm just nodding in agreement.
No, I thought that. Okay. So I think that therefore concludes any questions. Well, thank you very much again, Neil, for that report. And as we have said, obviously a lot more to follow. So the committee is asked to note the outcome of the Redmond review and developments in local (external) audit arrangements that are associated with the Corporate Governance Committee's responsibilities. Councillor Barton, did you want to move that, or am I imposing on you?
to move that we accept this.
Yes, indeed. Right, Councillor Barker. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mrs. Newton. So that's again, and I think from the questions, I think we would take it that that is all approved. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Neil. So we therefore go to agenda item 10, which is the Industrial Action Business Continuity Planning. It's pages 91 to 94, fairly short, but quite detailed within that few pages. And we're going to hear from the Chief Fire Officer. I think it's what I would term a reassuring, quite a reassuring report. But over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would echo your comments. It is a really reassuring report. Just to kind of give a whistle-stop tour of the history, the Home Office placed a requirement on us to assure them that we were able to provide a minimum of 25% of our fire cover in any circumstance. It's kind of linked to the Civil Contingencies Act requirement to have a plan for all foreseeable and unforeseeable risks, which is an interesting statement because I'm not sure how you can plan for something you can't even foresee. But ultimately, the requirement was placed on us to be able to guarantee a minimum of 25% appliance availability. And in September 2019, the Combined Fire Authority approved the use of a third-party provider. And this paper is ultimately to feed back to the Corporate Governance Committee that action has now been completed, a procurement process has been run, and that contract is in place and is completed. So ultimately, hopefully it's a contract we never have to use, and it's a load of wasted work and time. But if we ever do need to use it, that contract is in place and we are able to call off at any point in the time now. We had been asked to feed this back to the CGC, which obviously we've done. It's a decision for corporate governance. If they were happy that this completes that action, and updates will only be provided now if members would like it, or if we actually have to call off that contract. But I'm very conscious that's a member decision as to how they'd like to be updated in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Indeed. Well, yes, and as I said, I think the report really sets all that out. Members, do we have any? Mr. Harrison?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the Chief Officer for that and move the recommendation we note. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments, members? No? Okay then. So therefore, it is recommended that the committee notes the arrangements in place to employ a third-party contingency provider in order to put into place appropriate business continuity arrangements should the Leicestershire Fire and Rescue Service be exposed to periods of industrial action. That's proposed or moved by Mr. Harrison. I'm happy to second that from the chair, and I think again I have your approval, members, that is approved. Thank you very much. So therefore, we will move on to agenda item 11. Just bear with me while I just move the papers. So it's the Service Development Programme and our Plan 2024. It's an update, and again, I think it's a good news story, and I think again that's over to you, Chief.
Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, I won't take you through each element of this paper, as clearly people will have read it in advance. This paper always amazes me, the sheer amount of work that goes on that's often unseen or often unmentioned, and it's testament to everyone in the organisation who's kind of pulling on that rope whilst everything else is going on. There have been some delays in some of the projects due to the impact of COVID, but equally where we've been able to make progress, we have done so. A number of the projects are pretty much closing down now through completion. So the personal protective equipment replacement project is due for delivery in April. Everything's planned for that, so we'll get our new fire kit, new helmets, etc. Demountable devices, ICT service management, payroll, fleet replacement, they're all progressing really, really well. There is a couple of paragraphs that I'd like to draw to members' attention. It's on page 103, and it's pretty much paragraph 67 to 70, and it's in relation to a staff engagement survey that we've now completed. Big effort to engage with the staff, to listen to their voices and see about their feelings around the organisation and where we can look to improve. The completion or return rate was exceptionally good. So organisationally, I think off the tip of my tongue, it was around about 60%, which doesn't sound magnificently impressive, but when you speak to people who do staff engagement surveys, actually anything over 40% is a really good return. So near on 60% is really good. The feedback from it, I have to say, is phenomenally good and positive. There's a real sense of pride in the organisation at the moment that I'm really, really keen to harness and promote, and people are really proud of our service and are proud of our values and our behaviours. What I would say is it's not completely in favour of us doing an absolutely amazing job in every area. There's some really useful and constructive feedback which we are listening to make sure that we tailor our approach and our engagement with the service even better for the future. But overall, a really good piece of work, and I can't stress enough that even during COVID, whilst we're under a lot of challenges and a lot of pressures, the workforce is engaged with the service and really happy to talk, listen and support us in moving forward. It's also really, really encouraging that of our recently undertaken work around our values of positive, professional and honest, 98 to 99% of the staff said they understand it, they value them, they recognise them and they're supportive of them. It's a really powerful message. But rather than me just carry on telling what's in the paper, Chairman, happy to take any questions if there are any.
Well, thank you, Chief, and yes, and I'm particularly heartened, at the quality, if you like, of the staff feedback. I'm a great believer in asking the people who actually do the job very often right at the coalface, if you like, because the people doing the job can very often come up with some of the most productive sort of suggestions as to how we can improve matters even further, and that for me was a very important part. And I think from this committee, and I'm sure they will agree, we should really within these minutes thank the members who contributed, because that's quite a high set of replies. That's really good. Mr. Harrison, yes, you have your.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Callum, my comments are along the lines that if some people are critical, that's fantastic, because the only way we're going to improve our organisation is understanding the issues. And we can all be blasé and just look across the top, but really it's when you dig down a little bit, and I think that's the way we will only keep improving, and that's the way you will boost morale when people are confident to be able to say, well, this isn't right, we don't like that, and whatever it is applicable. So for that, I think well done. First class, thank you.
Yes, I agree, Mr. Harrison. I think it's a measurement of the working together within all our teams, and I think that is evident by the fact that we can have these comments. Well, this is okay, but perhaps we can do a little better here. And I think that's really what I was meaning when I said I am heartened. But thank you very much for that. Members, do we have any other questions? No? Well, okay. So I think, well, thank you very much, Callum. So the recommendation is that the Corporate Governance Committee is asked to note the progress made since September 2020 in the delivery of projects within the Service Development Programme and the tasks that are included in our plan 2024. And I'm very happy to move that from the chair. I'm looking for a seconder.
A second.
Thank you again, Mrs. Newton. That's excellent. Thank you. And again, members, I think we will take that as moving forward. So therefore, we move to agenda item 12, which is our penultimate report. It's Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services Improvement Plan and the COVID-19 inspection. And as I said earlier at the start of this meeting, once we've done with an element of the business, but I'll leave it to the Chief, we can have the latest COVID update. So it's pages 109 to 112 of your agenda pack. And I think without further ado, over to you, Chief.
Thank you again, Chair. There's a twofold reason for this paper. One is to update you and assure you that the action plan is progressing and it's progressing reasonably well. We're by no means complete on it, but we are biting off some reasonable sized chunks of that as we go. The second is to make members aware, at the end of October, we received a inspection from HMI CRFS specifically related to our response of COVID. That was done across the country, so we weren't singled out in any way, shape or form. It was a virtual inspection. At the time of writing this paper, we hadn't received any feedback. However, subsequently, between the writing of the paper and now, I have received the verbal feedback from the inspectorate, and I will always caveat this in the way that they caveated it with me until I get the letter in my hand to show you exact wording. It is subject to change. But the overarching feedback from the inspectorate themselves was really, really positive. It's really clear the organisation has been working hard, and myself and the officers and Mr. Rushton, who was also interviewed, also stressed actually Leicestershire and Rutland have never really emerged from the first wave due to the lockdown restrictions in various areas. We've been in this constant state of response for a long, long time, and I think the team and I did quite a good job to say we're in a really unique circumstance in LLR, and that was reflected in some of the work we've done. But overall, they were exceptionally complimentary. No areas of concern, no suggestions for areas of improvement. We've responded to the community's need exactly as we should do in a real breadth of ways across a number of avenues. I'm sorry I haven't been able to publish it yet, but we've actually got a really good report of everything that we've done as a fire and rescue service. It's not massively long, but I'll look to share that with councillors as soon as it's ready, just to kind of show you the breadth and depth of activity that we've been involved in to support the local resilience forum and ultimately our community. But I should get sight of the draft letter in mid-December for publication in January, but as soon as we've got that, I'll share that with members. But realistically, the HMI COVID inspection is a real pat on the back for the organisation and the work that people have been doing. Don't get me wrong, I'll take my percentage of that, but ultimately it's down to every team and every individual in the organisation, because without them, we're not going to be in as good a position as we are. But yeah, it's a positive day and a really good day for Leicestershire Fire, subject to the letter changing. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. And no, the COVID thing, am I right, Chief? And I hope I'm right. Paul Weston was not at all well earlier on, was he not, in the year with COVID?
Yeah, he was.
And he's with us, of course, today. So I should have said we're delighted, that he's made a full recovery and is here to play, an excellent part in the fire service. But over to you, Chief. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I should probably cover the update of COVID now. If
yes, okay. That was leading into that. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think the way I'd phrase it is the first wave of COVID, whilst it affected the communities dramatically, the fire and rescue service were broadly unaffected by the levels of sickness or levels of absence from the workplace. We responded incredibly well. We've been integral in the multi-agency arena, so working with local resilience forum partners, taking our fair share and a bit more of work in other activities. As time's gone on, and it would be remiss of me to say the last 3 weeks have become increasingly challenging for us. So the number of COVID cases we've had in the organisation since the outset is now at 19, and probably a reasonable number of them came in the last 3 weeks. Where we are really becoming impacted is the number of people having to self-isolate. So not actually having COVID case themselves, but self-isolating, which meaning they can't be in the workplace. To the point of over the last weekend, all our absence figures, so including all of the COVID cases, all of our other sickness and those self-isolating, reached a rather scary 94. So out of an organisation of in the region of 650, we had 94 people outside of the organisation. I'm really happy to say that number has already dropped significantly, and we're down in the low 70s, and fire cover's not been detrimentally affected. Our control room, actually their sickness has been almost impeccable throughout the last 3 weeks, which is brilliant. So our service delivery aspect is consistently high, but I would be remiss not to say it's affecting us more significantly than it was last time. The people who are self-isolating, we've had a few instances in stations where COVID has come into the service and appears to have been transmitted to 3 or 4 people. but actually the vast majority of the cases and the self-isolations are all because of family life or outside life from the service. So our procedures and our protocols are all in place. We're continuing to deliver the service and we're continuing to deliver it well, but we have got one eye on those figures of people out of the organisation, and we're monitoring that on a daily basis to make sure that number goes down rather than up. I think it is fair to say we're probably going to see a continued number of absences out the workplace, as probably every organisation and every aspect of life is seeing it at the moment. It's manageable at the moment, and if it changes, obviously I'll notify the chairman and vice chairman of the authority. But just so members are aware, the number did peak at, well, it's 94, it peaked out at the weekend, but it's already dropped down to lower 70s. Happy to take any questions, or if there's any areas Pete would like me to cover in more detail, please feel free to ask questions.
Indeed. I think I have Mrs. Newton. Yes? You need to unmute, Mrs. Newton. You need to unmute.
It's okay. Yes,
That's
it's my
brilliant. Excellent.
mouse stuck there. I just wanted to say, perhaps we as members could send a message of support out there to the fire service, to our workers, to commend them for actually carrying on during this very difficult period, and that just lets them to know that we support them and thank them for everything that they're doing on our behalf. My daughter works in the emergency department of Leicester Hospital, and it is not easy in the frontline public services at this point in time. So please send our best wishes to all the staff working out there on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Newton, and I've got no doubt the whole of this committee will support that. I think it's easy to forget that when our crews are on, a life-saving call out, social distancing goes out of the window. And whilst we're all trying to look after ourselves individually, when you say frontline service, this is particularly frontline service. It's dangerous enough in its normal, if I can say it in that way, it's normal sort of running. But no, please take that back. Councillor Barton.
Thank you. My question was relating to if the numbers of people that were not available to us because of self-isolation or illness were to increase as we come into flu season as well, whether or not the organisation that we're using for contingency during industrial action, would we be able to call on their services for other times when the number of staff available is depleted significantly?
Good question, Chief.
Yeah, the answer to that quite simply is yes, we can. It's a contingency arrangement that we can call off any shortage of staffing if we needed to. That would probably be one of my last resorts to activate that contract if we needed to. Whilst the numbers are high, that is spread across the organisation, so we're quite a way away from that. And actually, the operational crews and the managers have been delivering it quite well. But the answer to your question, Councillor Barton, is yes, we could use that if needed to.
Good. Councillor Kaufman. Sorry, my screen is slightly, but I think Councillor Kaufman, yes?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. You'll probably put me in my place if this question is inappropriate. But in addition to COVID, we've got Brexit coming in one form or another. I understand, or we've Brexited, but the implementation of something is on the 31st of December. This is the last meeting before these two, the second of the events is going to happen. Have we made special provision? What have we done about it? I'm thinking particularly of our relationship with the main import centres, I suppose, in our area, which is East Midlands Airport, and a lot of things like that. So,
no, I think that's a fair question.
Some reassurance, please.
Yes, fair question, and I'm sure the Chief will refer to earlier papers, both within our main, our main meetings, and indeed this one, where, of course, there is plans afoot. Well, their plans are in place going forward for COVID, but a useful opportunity just to update, perhaps, Chief.
Certainly, Chairman. So Thankfully, the local resilience forum, which is where all the major agencies come together to either respond to operational incidents or to plan for major significant impacts, have been talking about Brexit probably for the best part of 2.5 years. Each organisation have already investigated and contacted their suppliers to make sure that service continuity will be maintained. So for our point of view, probably the main one, but not the only one, would be Sistel, our command and control mobilising system provider, is based in France. It is a French company. We've got all the necessary arrangements in place and discussions with them to make sure they're completely able to fulfil their contracts with us far in advance of this meeting. It was probably done about 18 months ago, but we've continuously revisited that. Equally, the strategic coordinating group and tactical coordinating group, which sits underneath it as part of the COVID response, isn't now solely looking at COVID. It's also looking at the Brexit implications, along with, someone mentioned earlier, that the potential of flu season or a flu pandemic, and indeed the likely increase in severe weather over the coming weeks or months. So as an organisation, we're well set, and we've been looking at it for a number of months, if not years now. And as a county-wide partnership, the Local Resilience Forum is well set up for that and well gauged for it. I think, like most people, well, I might, if I was a betting man, I'd suggest there might be some breakthroughs in the coming weeks or months as we get closer to the deadline. The exact implications of those, we'll have to wait to see exactly what deals can be done or can't be done. But we're reasonably well set, is where I would suggest, both as a fire service and as a LLR area.
Okay, well, Mr. Kaufman, I'm certainly not going to put you in your place for that. In fact, I'm going to thank you very much for that question, because I think, as you say, it is timely. But do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Chairman, but thank you for allowing the question.
No, indeed. Well, thank you for putting it. So, right, well, it's only a matter of days now, and I don't think our chief is necessarily expecting a direct call from the Prime Minister, but no doubt you will be getting a whole load of paperwork as once the whole thing is announced as being signed, as it were, and we're very much into 1st of January 2021 mode. So, well, members, if there are no other questions on this particular item, we're being asked as a committee, the recommendation is that the committee is recommended to note the progress of the improvement plan since the last update in September 2020, and also the recent HMIC FRS COVID-19 inspection, and the outcome. We've had a verbal sort of update, which is again good news, but the written report will follow. Would you like to move that, Mrs. Newton, and perhaps Mr. Kaufman asking a question, you'd like to second it?
I move.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Newton. Mr. Kaufman?
I'll second it. Probably
Indeed.
get the name on the minutes.
Thank you very much, and we'll take that again on that particular paper, as I think all in favour. Yes, indeed, thank you. So that takes me forward then to agenda item 13. It's our final report. It concerns the annual procurement report 2019-2020. It's pages 113 to 118 on your agenda pack. And again, it's the Chief who's going to present this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. A relatively short one, this one. The paper's here because it's required as of Rule 19.2 of the Contracts Procedure Rules. The paper is relatively self-explanatory around where we've awarded significant contracts or where we've wavered the process, and they're detailed in the relevant sections, say section 9 and 10 in the paper, page 114 and 115 respectively. I think the only thing I'd draw members' attention to is paragraph 13, which is to highlight that there have been no breaches of the rules identified, and there was no legal action taken against the Combined Fire Authority for either procuring or waiving procedures. I would suggest, Chairman, that members will have read that in advance. If they have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I won't go through each individual item unless necessary.
No, I agree. I think it's one of those reports that actual, it covers the elements and the aspects necessary. But do we have any questions, members? No, I think therefore we're clear on that. Well, thank you very much again for that report. So the recommendation is the committee is asked to note the summary of procurement activity in 2019-2020 as required in Rule 19.2 of the Contract Procedure Rules. I'm happy to move that from the chair. I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Mrs. Newton. That's seconded, and therefore, members, I will take that as fully supported. Thank you. So therefore, I go on to agenda item 14. I have no urgent items such to mention. So that takes us to agenda item 15, which is the date of the next meeting. The next meeting date of the Corporate Governance Committee will be held on Wednesday, the 20th of January 2021 at 2 o'clock via the same arrangement we have today. I'm not going to make any reference to Christmas and wish everyone a Merry Christmas, etc., because, of course, we have a full meeting of the CFA, and that's on the 16th of December, I think starting at 10 o'clock. I know we've not had the papers yet, but that's what I'm anticipating. So I'm sure the chairman will be able to do all the festive greetings going forward, as it were. So it remains for me to thank the chief and his team and all our officers, and thank you indeed, members, for your attendance this afternoon and for your contribution, which is always to the standard that we expect from this committee. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing everyone in December.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening and take care.
Thank you, everyone.